Welcome to another episode of Gaming Mayhem. Today, as I promised many times, where I'm going to talk about Chaos Dwarves and the army list and what I do to build my list and how I use each of the units in game. So, one of the things I think is really important when you're thinking about what army to play in any game, whether it be Warhammer or any other miniature type of game, is how much you actually like the idea of the army as well as the models. You gotta get something you're gonna really get attached to so you can kind of feel it and get into it, so when you play it, it's more like think of it like an RPG experience. You get that little extra feeling rather than just playing chess or checkers. And for me, that's where the Chaos Dwarves came from. So my lists are not your standard competition list by any means. They all have kind of a thematic to them, and that's how I design all my lists for everything. And I think that's important. If you love the figures you're playing with, you're going to play more, you're going to enjoy the game more, and hopefully you can get to a point where you'll enjoy the game, win or lose, because you like playing with those models. And that's where I usually am. Of course, nobody likes to get trounced, so you want to have enough competitive level in your army that it can do something. And I've found that you can, generally, if you take any idea, you can find a way to make it work with just a few modifications to where you're not going to get completely wiped out. Now, we play, our standard games are 4,000 points. On occasion, we'll play lower at 3 if we're like introducing somebody to the game, but rarely do we ever go below 4,000. On occasion, we'll play 5,000 or something like that. What this allows is, if you look at a typical 2400 list, you really have to pare down. You'll see a lot of stuff not taken, a lot of naked commands, a lot of units that never get taken, because if you do like the math hammer stuff, they're really not worth it. And if you're playing at a very hard competitive level, you don't have a choice. So again, for us, we play the game for fun, and that's where the 4,000 points came from. So with Chaos Dwarfs, it still isn't that many units, really, at all. I don't even fill up like a third of the board with my whole army. So it's not really that big of an army. Now, if you got like Skaven, it could be pretty huge. But then again, you can also take a lot of those kind of cool units you wouldn't take normally, like Vermin Lords and that. A couple Hell Pit Abominations with lots of stuff packed on them. And that's where I'm coming from. So what I do with most of my armies is I have a template. Now, my Chaos Dwarf template, this is what I start with. This is essentially the units that I'm going to use in every army. Now, I'll go through these and I'll explain which ones I take out. So, of course, I always take a Sorcerer Prophet. It's your only Lord choice. I usually, I always upgrade him to a level 4. I always give him the pistol. What else do I give him? Then, for his magic items, I actually kind of fiddle it. Sometimes I'll give him the one that gives him to +1 to cast and dispel. It almost goes to, in this case, my generic build, looking on here, I give him the Trickster Helm, and the Channeling Staff, and a Dawnstone. Now, the logic behind that is to make sure he stays alive. He's very expensive, and I need his magic. I also, my Lord always takes Hashut, since he's the only one that has access to it, and I feel all Chaos Dwarf armies should be using Hashut if they can. So I always give that to him. Also, I'm going to put him on a Bale Torch or a Lamassu. The Bull Taurus is fine for a cheaper option, but I don't know. Not as cool to me. I'd rather have a Flaming Bull. The Lamassu is, if I'm going to go magic heavy. Now, if I do something, if I want to put him on a Lamassu, I'll then in turn also take probably 3 of the heroes to just have a magic heavy army. So what I'll do with him, since you don't want to get him in direct fire, is carry him around on a flank attack, and then have a faster unit like a Destroyer or the Kadai Fireborn or your Bull Centaurs come in for a main attack, and that makes him fairly effective. He can cast his spells, and On a Bale Torch, the guy's pretty tough. So those armor things help make sure he stays alive. He can survive challenges. If he happens to get hit, he's got several chances to hopefully survive from a spell. So the next thing I always take is a Hobgoblin Con. I always take the Hobgoblin Con in a unit of Wolf Riders. So he'll go with a unit of 9 Wolf Riders, so that gives me 5x5. That is never optional. I always take him because I like him. I think he's cool, and I think the Wolf Riders are cool. I give him the Sword of Might, simply because they're not that good, and it gives them a little bit more punching power. They're only fast cav, so they're going to be running away a lot of the time. But if you get a chance to get that charge in, and especially if you can get the rear flank charge, so I try to do, you get the extra combat res, and that little extra strength really helps against armored units. You notice a lot of weird cuts. My camera's been doing some really weird stuff, buffer overflowing, so I'm going to try to get through this and then figure out what the heck is wrong with it. So as I was saying, they're able to take care of a lot of the smaller units, like skirmishing archers, or skinks, or something like that. They can get in there fast and hit them and take them out. So I take the Dark Castellan as my BSB and give him the Banner of Slavery, which gives Hobgoblin units immune to psychology. So additionally, I always take 2 units of Hobgoblin archers at 10x3, so 30 of them, and I put the unit with the Castellan right dead center with those in front. So the Hobgoblins are there to absorb all of the firepower, and the immune to psychology keeps them from running away. I give them the bows because it's nice and annoying. You got 60 guys shooting arrows, you're gonna kill something. Not a lot, but they're there to be annoying and protect the dwarves from being hit by stuff. So the Banner Slaver to me is a must. It's absolutely fantastic. You can even use them as in one of the armies where I don't use war machines, you can use that and just shift everybody up slowly. Have the Hobgoblins match the speed of the dwarfs, and you've got a great barrier that isn't gonna run away. And then I take 2 of the Damon Smiths, always, and well, with one exception. There's one list I don't take the Damon Smiths in, but usually the Damon Smiths, they go in between, next to a war machine or in between 2 war machines, so they can get their Lookout Sir and they can provide their reroll. As I said, then I have 2 Hobgoblin units. I don't usually give the Hobgoblins anything. On occasion, I'll give them a musician if I think I might want to do something funky with them, but they're there to die, so I don't give them standards. As much as that could be helpful if they get in combat, I don't usually do it simply because they're gonna die. I've experimented with it, and sometimes it works out actually. But again, if somebody hits my army and they're fighting the Hobgoblins, and the Hobgoblins actually win combat res, it's not looking good for the other guy at that point, because if Hobgoblins can withhold your main attack, you're not doing pretty good. So then I do 2 or 3 units of Infernal Guard at 20 with Fireglaves. I like the Fireglaves, that's why I take them. I think they're cool. You get a 9-inch shooting attack. It's not the greatest, but you do get the bonus strength in close combat as well. Plus, they're shooting fire glaives, which is kind of awesome. So I take those as my main core, and I also take a unit of the blunderbusses. I run those. I usually take 25 of them, and give or take, depending on meet the points. But I always run 10 across, so you get the bonus for shooting 10 at once, and the bonus for shooting 20 at once. The rerolls to wound. And that unit, all my dwarf units get full everything. Everything always gets full commands except Hobgoblins, and even the Wolf Riders get full commands. The blunderbuss unit is generally what I've found is so terrifying for anyone to charge that they never do. They never end up getting in combat unless somebody gets a flyer around on them. Because nobody wants to take a stand and shoot from what could end up being 60 shots. So it's a good, solid board, let's call it quarter control unit, where you can guide and funnel the opponent where you want them to go. So keep in mind, dwarves don't move. They're slow, they're super slow. So you have to assume you're going to be getting charged most of the time. So you want to be able to direct where the opposing enemy is coming from. So that is that's my basic army. That's what I start out with before I take anything, any special ones. So let's look at the Gunline variant. Yeah, the Gunline variant here. This is for me is probably the nastiest version of the army. I had 2 magma cannons, a Death Shrieker rocket, a Dreadquake mortar, and a Hell cannon. That's max points. And that does have the 3. So I've got 3 units of foot soldiers to kind of fan. I'll fan them like this, with the blunderbuss on one side, and then I put the Bale Torch on the opposite side with the Wolf Riders. So they're going to do my conjoined fast movement attacks, and then I've got the shield of Hobgoblins in front of the arc of Infernal Guard. And then behind them I've got the slew of War Machines. I always give them Hellbound because I think it's cool. I don't know, it sounds cool. It gives them the extra wound. It makes them near impossible to kill outright. I mean, even from cannons, it can be a little harder, I guess. But I like having the extra wound. It can sometimes backfire, of course, if you get a misfire, but I always have I always have my Damon Smiths to do the rerolls to help prevent that. But I find that army it's pretty nasty, and if somebody doesn't, let's say I actually get good rolls, then it's really bad. We've had one where that was, I think by turn 2, they had almost nothing left because I had really amazing rolls with it. So I generally don't use that particular list unless somebody requests it. Sometimes in our group we have a pretty cool group of guys, and they'll purposely want to try to fight something weird. Like I'll say, hey, take that, I want to try to, I'm going to try to make a list to specifically beat that. And we'll do it, and it's a lot of fun. So what is the next list here is the one with the Bull Centaurs. So with the Bull Centaurs, and then, so we're minus out the War Machines again. The only War Machines I take in this list is the Magma Cannon and a Dreadquake. Then I take the Bull Centaurs with the Tarok. Always, he gets the Tarok. I give him the Crown of Command and a Sword of Striking. I like Sword of Striking because then he's hitting on 2s most of the time. The Crown of Command is because I'm going to throw these guys way up there. They're only going to, and I do not take a champion in a 4,000 point list. In the bigger list, I'll take the champion, but normally I run them 3 and 3. So if I do that, I can't take a champion because that would put my character in the back, and I don't want that. So what I do when I run them bigger is I'll run 4 and 3. But I generally put the Turok in the place where the champion would be. Then, of course, the Centaurs, I give them a Razor Standard because I have a hard time, I think Chaos Dwarves in general have a hard time dealing with heavy armor. Let's say you have Empire Inner Circle Knights. They're kind of tough to kill because they're armor saves. So I give that to them to hopefully get that extra oomph to get the kills in. And then with the Crown of Command, if I lose, I've got a high enough roll that I'm probably going to stay there. Because this is where you got your movement. And I want to go find a badass unit like Inner Circle Knights, and I want to either wipe them out or get them stuck in combat so they can't get around my flank and hit the War Machines. So you can see with a list like this, I've only got 2 War Machines. So I've still got enough damage, and this is a key thing to a Chaos Dwarf army, is I've got to be able to shoot enough to make the other guy have to come to me. If you can't outshoot the other guy, they're never going to come to you, and since you move so slow, you'd be annihilated walking up to their line. So that's the Turok list. I love them. The models are fantastic, so that's why I made a list specifically to accommodate those guys. The next one here is similar list, and this one I can still take the I call it like that kind of the mini monster list. So I still take the Centaurs and the Turok, but then I add in a Destroyer and a unit of Kadai Fireborn. I take the Kadai Fireborn, 6 of them, with the Man Burner. Again, this is a little bit different list. You have to shuffle forward with this list. The Sorcerer Prophet is there kind of for providing some extra support, but the whole army kind of has to move forward every turn. well, at least the first 2 turns, because you need to be able to get your dwarfs into combat of some kind. Because you've only got the Bull Centaurs, a Destroyer, and the Kadai that can move. Your Kadai Fireborn don't have long. You got to get them in combat as fast as possible. So I barrel them up right away. A lot of times doing it in conjunction with a Destroyer, you can either double hit a unit, or you can hit 2 units, but the advantage of that is people see a Destroyer, they don't focus on the Fireborn. So he can soak up a lot of the hits that might wipe out your Fireborn unit. Again, this is a less competitive list because you don't have the shooting. It's kind of hard to play. As far as that goes, you got to really coordinate how and when you're going to execute charges, because you need to be getting in charges with dwarfs for 1, which is always hard. But you need to be getting in those flanks. You really have to get them in because, again, fantasy is a combat resolution game. So that's going to be the primary focus. Then I got this guy. What list is this one? Okay. This is my master monster list. So in this one, I drop out the Bull Centaurs. I drop out a unit of the regular Chaos Dwarf Corps, the Fireglaves. So I put a Destroyer, the unit of Kadai Fireborn, a unit of Infernal Ironsworn. So I don't usually use them, and a Siege Giant. So this plays pretty much exactly the same way. It's just a cool looking variant and an excuse to use the Siege Giant, which I give him the Runes of Hate. So he's a little more effective. Plus he looks cool. Giants are giants. They're fun to play. Cannons suck if somebody shoots them, but they are fun to play. This goes the same way as the other one, although the Giant pairs up with the Sorcerer Prophet on the Bale Torch as a rule. So again, the flanking, the combination charges, the ability to get that combat res in. These aren't... Anytime you get the big monsters or units that aren't just massive or hoarding, you gotta really make sure you're getting in those extra charges. That extra 1 point for that flank means the world in that case. I got one more normal list here, I think. Somewhere. Well, I don't know. I didn't print that one. Another one I'll do sometimes if I'm really having fun, or especially in our 5,000 point game, is I'll do the monster. I'll throw a Magma Dragon in. And the Magma Dragon, I take the super souped up version, it's like 900 points. And he's got he gets Lore Fire. And he's pretty nasty. But again, with the way they've done the canon rules, he's still a prime target. If you're playing Empire, you gotta hide your big ass dragon and cower him behind something or he's gonna die. But he's fun to play with. Again, he's still more of a flanking unit. At 900 points, you've gotta, especially when I do the 4,000, if I use him, he has got to be protected constantly, because that is an instant, that's nearly 25% of your army, and he dies very easy for what he is. You've got to get him stuck in, so he can't be shot at and he can't be magicked with some horrible death spell. He's vicious in combat. He's one of the few units, again at 900 points he should be, that you can slam into a unit and you can probably win combat res against him. So I find that kind of fun to use. One thing I didn't mention here is the trains, the Skullcracker and the Iron Damon variant. The Iron Damon, the cannon one, the Skullcracker is the big butcher thing. Those I use kind of randomly, just as I'd like to use them a lot. So I'll pull out one of my war machines and put one of those in instead. Sometimes I'll pull out one of the units of the Fireglaves and throw one of those in, kind of as the mood fits me. I've used 2 of them before, slap them in each side of the board and kind of just chug them forward and do different things with them. They're really fun. Again, I always give them the Hellbound, because that makes them pretty tough. So talking about that unit in particular, they're a very difficult unit to use. It's kind of a chariot. Again, you can only go forward. You can only rotate one time to go to something. You've got the random movement, and the impact hits are fantastic, but they do not have a grind attack. it's they get a stomp. It is a special stomp, and they get a lot of, you can get a lot of stomp attacks out of them, especially on the Skullcracker. So you got to make sure they do not get into combat with cavalry, monstrous infantry, monstrous beasts, monsters of any kind at all, or you're stuck fighting the dwarves. Now, another thing I found with them is you can also do something. Now, with the Iron Daemon, it's not as good because it shoots. I mean, you get the good shooting with the cannons, so it's fairly useful for that. With the Skullcracker, is if there's an annoying unit, let's say a flyer, Pegasus, or pterodons, something like that are flying around, get the Skullcracker into combat with them. The thing's toughness is like 8, so they can't kill the stupid thing. And then they're stuck there fighting it for 3 turns. You can only get 3 attacks because the dwarves on it can attack, but it can't do anything if it gets charged and can't stop them, right? So, but it's good. It's an expensive tar pit, but it can work as a tar pit. So if you have those on there and you can't figure out what to do with them, or you don't have any good charges in, then do that. Now, the Skullcracker itself, that thing is a beast. It can pretty much charge anything. I've charged it against, it was a big unit of Inner Circle Knights, I think, and straight up slammed into it. But you get so many impact hits that it can win combat res and break him. Now, I can't chase him, but it'll break him and keep hitting him. So that thing it's a beast. I mean, just slam it into stuff. And if you could ever get a nice coordinated strike with that thing, you're gonna win combat res outright. It's vicious. The only danger is, again, watch for it getting charged. And anyone that knows what those things do is going to make sure they charge him with a flyer of some kind that can whip around him and get on the side. I don't think I missed any units. That's pretty much all of them. Kind of looking over at the ones I have here now. Yeah. And I said some I had the extra Damon Smiths. Now, Chaos Dwarfs are kind of a unique army, and they're very small. There's not a lot of diversity to them. Now, they were always like that. I mean, with the Ravening Hordes list was even less. There's the old book had like Black Orcs and other units in there. To me, I mean, that's cool. I get it. I kind of wouldn't use them, really, because I want my Chaos Dwarfs. I mean, they're good as slaves. If you want to assume they're slaves, they're fine. But as far as army goes, there's not a lot of variance. And you can see what I do. I use every unit possible for the army, and I've got about 7 different variant lists I do, and then of course small variations in those. I don't like to play the same army twice in a row ever. I always change it. That's just me. I enjoy changing it. I find it challenging for me to find a new way to play it every time, as well as I think it's fun for the other guys too. They're not stuck facing the exact same thing. Especially, let's say I play the Gunline Army and the guy got trounced, and then we play again next week. He's got to fight the same thing, and he knows he's going to get just annihilated. I don't think it's fun for the other guy either. And for me, I want both of us to have fun. So with the Chaos Dwarfs, you got to really think. Now so let's talk about the models. I got the Forge World models, and again, the reason I got into them was because I liked the models. I really think, I know some people said, like, they use the Mantic ones and stuff like that. Personally, I don't like Mantic models at all. I don't, they don't work for me. I don't find the quality, I don't find that the quality of the models matches what I see on their website when I get them. And I don't like the look particularly. There's a couple companies that do make some really cool Chaos Warfare alternative models. Russian Alternative being one. There's Ravenswood makes a really badass looking dude. I use him as a warrior Castellan in one list where I take an extra Castellan and he's just chopping up. Really cool model. And there's something like that, and I like those. If you want to go the old school guys, most of those are pretty cool. I personally didn't get the old Chaos Dwarf models, and I was going to at one point. I was going to run a full Ravening Hordes list, but there's just a couple models I never liked. I just don't like the sculpts, so I won't get them. And that's how I am pretty much with anything. If I look at an army and there's a unit I want to take because I like the unit, but I don't like the model, I just won't get the entire army. And that's the inverse, like with my 40k orcs, it kind of sucks because I like all of the models, so I have to get everything. So it can work against you both and for you as far as deciding. But I really think that's important. Chaos Dwarfs can get a bad rep because they can be kind of broken if you take certain combinations, especially at the tournament point level. You know, it can all be countered, of course, but I really think, especially with all Forge World stuff, they're meant to be a very fluffy, kind of fun army. And when you're making an army, especially if you're considering Chaos Dwarfs, don't rush it. You know, if you look at the Forge World models are really expensive, and they are. They're not honestly, they're not that bad compared to GW's prices anymore. Like 10 years ago, Forge World was brutal. I mean, they were like 4 times the equivalent of a GW, but GW's raised their prices a lot, so they're pretty much the same. If you like those models the best, then build the army slow. I mean, buy a unit at a time over the course of 2 or 3 years. There's nothing wrong with that. Nobody is... I mean, unless you're being paid on a professional level to be gaming, then it should be fun for you, and you should get what you want and what you like. And that's what I did. I got them over time. I hunted down out-of-print models to make certain things, like for my Hobgoblins. The only thing I didn't get that I really wanted was the old Citadel Hobgoblin archers, which I really wanted. But after 2 years of looking, I only had about 15 of them, and I needed at least 40. The archer models are brutally rare. The sneaky gets you could get, and I've thought about running a variant list with sneaky gets, but I'm happy with what I have. I have enough variants now. At some point, if I can ever, depending on what they do with 9th, you know, who knows, I'll maybe do that. Get the close combat guys. But again, I don't necessarily know about pulling my Hobgoblins away from my front line. So the bottom line is Chaos Dwarfs are fun. They're a cool army, they're evil bastards, they great backstory, and they can be really fun and diverse to play if you actually try. You can't math hammer them. If you do, there's pretty much one list to take. And it's a good list, a really good list, but you can't do the diversity. And I think they really benefit from that diversity. And I urge you guys, try out, like we're saying, the 4,000 point games, try them out. If you don't have the models, they're bases. You can get, I've demoed some armies, like I was thinking about making a Treeman army. All Treemen, so it'd be Treeman Ancient, Treeman, Dryads for core, and Treekin. And that's it, nothing else, because I just want to make an all Treeman army. So I went and bought a bunch of bases. I got an entire 4,000 points worth of army bases with trays for like $30, so I can demo the army. And it's easy. You can just mark what they are. I mean, and see if you like it. You know, see if you like that unit. If you can figure out how to play it. In this case, it was okay, but I found it very boring to play the army. So I ended up not getting it. So I'm out $30, but I still have bases I can use for whatever I want to do with, instead of being out hundreds and hundreds of dollars and then have an army that looks awesome and I like painting it, but I hate playing it. The same thing I did with, originally one of the first armies I was looking at was a Nurgle army, because I really liked the Forge World variants on them. But it had the same problem for me. It was boring for me to play. And there's not a lot of variation, because every unit pretty much stand there, move forward, event, move forward, attack. And that just doesn't work for me. So, again, if you're nervous about playing those bigger games, just use bases. I mean, everybody should be cool with that. And if they're not very cool. There's a difference between the guy bringing in the Legos who just doesn't want to buy models and genuinely wanting to try out a larger game with some different units before you buy them. And we do that with 40k and fantasy. We've proxied in tons of things to see if they make sense, if they're fun. Like we were, one of the guys was proxying a Reaver Titan. If you don't know anything about 40k, that's an insanely powerful unit. It's also really, really expensive to buy. So we tried it, and we came to the conclusion, and our 40k games are huge, that the thing is kind of so powerful it's not worth buying it because you're hardly ever going to use it. And that's just how, again, as a rule, our group, if we think something's overpowered, we just don't use it. It's just not fun. It's not fun for us. It's not fun for the guy you're playing. So, but it was good. You know, he was genuinely considering getting one. And after that, it was like, well, it'd be great, but I'm going to use it in 1 in 10 games. So I think I'll hold off on that until I get other stuff. And one guy in particular, he got into the game by playing an entire proxied army. He was very hesitant to try 40k by any means. And we did fantasy too. I take that back. We had another guy. So one guy with fantasy and one with 40k. They played an entire army of nothing but proxies, like mostly bases. And they enjoyed it so much that they went out and then bought their starter kit and then got some models, and then that proxying shrank. And I think if you're in a gaming group, it's good to promote that. I mean, of course, I agree. No one wants to play with the guy who will never buy any models. That's no fun. But if you're that guy, don't be a douchebag. I mean, just freaking buy a model every so often. I mean, you can buy a box. If you literally can't afford to buy any models in a month, this probably isn't the hobby for you. It's an expensive ass hobby. It really is. It's up there with cocaine. I mean, honestly, and any long-term wargamer, I'm sure agrees with me. It's insanely expensive and horribly addictive. So again, don't rush yourself. Get what you want. Get the models you like. Chaos Dwarfs are really fun. I generally, so I would say my win-loss with my variant armies. For some reason, I have a really hard time beating Lizardmen. I don't know why, but they always beat my Chaos Dwarfs. A guy that plays Lizardmen plays generally one list, but they are the toughest for me. I have beat them, and that was the one time I beat him. I got lucky. I shot the Dreadcrag, and the center hole landed on the general. He failed as a lookout, sir, and it killed him outright. So that really helped. But they're really tough, and Empire is kind of tough for me too, because again, they've got the gun line, so they can compete with my shooting. I've never tried the full-blown gun line against Empire. That might do better, but those are the two armies I find the most challenging. Ogres, if you take the war machines, poor ogres. They're ogres are a really cool army, but against Chaos Dwarf war machines, because they all do multiple wounds, it's nasty. It's not fun at all for the ogres. The rest are all seem pretty well matched. In the slower guys, Undead can have some troubles against Chaos Dwarfs as well. I like Tomb Kings especially. You know, a lot of flaming attacks, and they don't move up fast enough, so they're getting pounded on by the war machines until they get there. Similar to the problem they have with Empire, except there's no chance of the dwarves advancing. Whereas in Empire, they usually have some knight units that you can at least get stuck in with and hopefully kill. Wood Elves are pretty good against Chaos Dwarfs as well, because they so much beat them on speed, so much. High Elves can be as well. Again, depending on the type of High Elf armor you take, you don't want to stay back, because we did one like that where you tried to take a magic heavy but staying back, and the war machines just laid waste to them. But yeah, as a general rule, you're going to want at least 1 or 2 war machines with any regular Chaos Dwarf army. Like I said, I have my foot slogging monster one. That's definitely a what I call it, an expert level army, because good luck winning. It's hard to win with that army, really hard. It's fun, but it's hard to win with it. So I wouldn't recommend that as a starter one. Let me know what you guys think. Post some stuff of your armies too. I love to see them. Love talking about the Chaos Dwarfs. If you haven't seen the Chaos Dwarf forum, very fun little place. A bunch of enthusiasts, great pictures, some beautifully done Chaos Dwarf armies. So I hope you enjoyed this little discussion on the Chaos Dwarfs, the heroes of the fantasy world, and the saviors, because they have escaped the end times and probably always will, because they're very sneaky. They're gonna hide in the volcanoes. And we'll see you here next time at Gaming Mayhem.